Each and every Wednesday, we are here to discuss our rest of season top 150 rankings, how that plays into the season-long trade market, our redraft trade calculator, buy lows, sell highs, best ball contest, etc. Be sure to stay tuned to the end. We'll cover your listener questions and submit our one move to make of the week. There are not normally in-season trades. Now, there are not normally big in-season trades in the NFL. I think there's some valid reasons why it's harder to integrate football players into new teams and new systems than it is in baseball or basketball or anything like that. I think that's the biggest thing. But generally speaking, if I was a GM and my team sucked, my God, and I had old players that were expensive, my God, let me dump them for draft picks. And I think we're starting to see, like, as the NFL is getting more analytical, not just on the field, but off, you're going to start to see more of these trade deadlines approaching. We know we're dead. Let me salvage something here with a draft pick, like you see in baseball all the time with buyers and sellers at the deadline. Along those lines, the Davante Adams trade rumors are absolutely swirling right now. It sounds like this one actually has a chance to get done. Antonio Pierce went on Instagram, which I can't believe Antonio Pierce goes on Instagram. But anyways, Antonio Pierce went on Instagram and liked a post that said something like Davante Adams has played his last snap. We also, with the Raiders, we have Davante Adams out, quote unquote, with a hamstring injury. We have him telling management he wants a trade. He went on Kay Adams' show. By the way, close personal friend of the show, Kay Adams started her career doing a podcast with me and Silva, if you can believe that. Or maybe it was the other way around. But nevertheless, anyways, I think this one might go down here. Mark, how are you thinking about Raiders stuff? We'll start there before we get to other teams. Raiders stuff rest of season with all these trade rumors swirling around Davante.
All the signs seem to point to Davante Adams not being a Raider at some point this season. You mentioned it's hard in the NFL to do these deals, especially for major wide receivers, to integrate them into different offenses. And I think that's why Davante Adams has come out and said his preferred landing spots are the Jets, where he obviously has played with Aaron Rodgers in his career, or the Saints, where he played with Derek Carr in Vegas. Pretty much the reason he went to Vegas in the first place was to play with his college quarterback and Derek Carr. Also, the wide receivers coach for the Saints is Davante Adams' personal wide receiver coach in the offseason, I read as well. So some links to both of those organizations. In terms of the Raiders, we kind of got a sneak peek into what their offensive personnel could look like without Davante Adams this past week. As you mentioned, he was out with a hamstring injury. Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker were the two primary wide receivers there. Both ran 92% of the routes for the Raiders. And then the Raiders also employed 12 personnel at the highest rate of the season so far. Almost 50% of their snaps came from 12 personnel usage. Brock Bowers had his highest route rate of the season at 77% without Davante Adams in week 3. And when we get teams playing, 12 personnel more, that likely funnels more targets to the wide receivers. So Trey Tucker and Jacoby Myers, I think, are both good buys at this point. You're not necessarily sneaking anything over on your league mates, because everyone knows about this Davante Adams situation. I think if Jacoby Myers, became the wide receiver 1 here, he'd be a weekly wide receiver 3 for us. Probably get projected anywhere between 7 and 10 targets. Trey Tucker's targets have been solid to start the season as well. He'd be in a similar range, probably wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4. And then Brock Bowers we have as a tight end 3 rest of the season. I think even with or without Davante Adams, he's still one of the top 3 tight ends out there. So overall on the Raiders, I think it's a pretty bullish outlook on them, and targets should condense here in a decent way. We know they have pretty much no running game to speak of at this point. In terms of Davante Adams, it's hard to know how his rest season outlook is before we know what team he's playing on. But I do think the Raiders are solid buys at this point in time.
Yeah, so I'll get to Davante Adams in a second. Daigle, I wanted to go on Brock Bowers for a second, because I think he's an interesting buy right now. If you get the Davante Adams trade, do you think that actually helps Bowers? I'm not certain that it does, but I don't think it could be a good thing. I think a better thing for Brock Bowers is actually getting Michael Mayer back into the lineup to free Brock Bowers up to do more things in the pass game while Mayer sits in line. We have Brock Bowers 45 overall right now in the rest of season top 150, tight end 3. What do you think about Brock Bowers as a buy?
What I like about both Bowers and Myers is that, unlike when you're trying to buy someone high. As Mark mentioned, everyone is aware of the Davante Adams situation. Like Jaden Reed, for example, buying high. It's a little harder when someone has 140 total yards, but Myers and Bowers are coming off poor performances. Jacoby Myers, less than 50 receiving yards in the box score. Bowers, just a 12.5% target share in week 4. So both of those options, yes, you actually, I feel like, can sneak by for less than their value the rest of the way.
Yeah, so do I. Okay. On Davante Adams himself, he will be 32 in December. I think some underlying stuff doesn't look as good as it has been. He's making a ton of money, though. Anyone that's trading for him, I would think, has a featured role. Now, if he goes to the Jets, they already have Garrett Wilson. They already have Mike Williams. They already have the shower narrative going with Allen Lazard. I mean, it's not going to be great for any of those guys. I think Davante Adams would perform better with Aaron Rodgers than, of course, he did with Gardner Minshew or AOC or whatever else. We have Davante Adams 30 overall. The other spot with the Saints is an interesting one as well. They have been so condensed to 3 guys, Kamara, Shaheed, and Olave. Expanding that wouldn't be great for those guys either. Jack, I don't know. Like, if I had Davante Adams right now, I would probably just be holding him. I'm not sure about going out and getting him either right now. It's probably just a hold all around for me. But what do you think about handling Davante himself?
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I'm not really sure who in fantasy leagues would be trying to trade for Adams right now. It seems like he is going to be out for the time being with this quote unquote hamstring injury. And then the 2 landing spots, as you mentioned, the Jets and Saints that he wants to go to, neither of them are super ideal. I mean, it's a massive quarterback upgrade either way, but if he goes to the Jets with Aaron Rodgers, he has to compete for targets with Garrett Wilson in probably the slowest offense in the NFL. And then the Saints, Chris Olave, Kamara, and Shaheed command so many targets that it's hard for him to command that 30% share that we're used to seeing.
Yeah, so we have all 3 Saints guys in the top 60 right now. Shaheed, 56, Kamara, and Olave, both in the top 20. Those guys would certainly take a hit if they land there. And then, of course, on the Jets side, it's been so ugly for Garrett Wilson. We dropped him down to 29. Matchups aren't getting any easier. Garrett Wilson is the only pass catcher that we even have in the top 150 here. Let's stay on this trade theme for a second here, Mark. We'll go to Cleveland where, I mean, the only Brown pass catcher I'm actually interested in starting at any point right now is Amari Cooper, just because he can make such big plays. And by the way, that was an awful holding call. Amari Cooper should have had an 80-yard touchdown or whatever it was, 70-yard touchdown. That was a really bad call late in that game. And the conversation around Amari and probably Deshaun Watson would be different because they probably would have won the game if that play would have stood and Amari would have had a big stat line. But anyways, makes sense to trade Amari Cooper if you're the Browns right now. A lot of smoke around that one as well. What do you think about handling Browns stuff, Mark?
I think even without an Amari Cooper trade, I'm relatively interested in buying either David Njoku or Jerry Jeudy here. Obviously, the Seas would part quite a bit more if Amari Cooper was traded. He's had close to a 25% target share this season that would get distributed to the rest of the team. We have David Njoku coming back off this high ankle sprain. Not necessarily sure how healthy he'll be. It's kind of, they didn't place him on IR and he's already missed 3 games at this point. So, kind of the longer timeline here for David Njoku. And we know how detrimental high ankle sprains can be to skill position players. But this offense is pretty much catered to exactly what David Njoku does well, which is get the ball to their players' hands in space. We know the Browns have one of the highest pass rates over expectation in the NFL, and Watson is 3rd in the NFL in pass attempts and 25th in average depth of target out of 30 quarterbacks. So I think a lot of dump offs to David Njoku are likely once he returns. So I think, just given the lack of talent we've seen at the tight end position this year, David Njoku is a solid buy at this point. When I was looking into this as well, I was a little more excited about Jerry Jeudy's underlying utilization as well. He's run more routes than Amari Cooper in each of the last 2 weeks. He's seen 8, 6, 7, and 9 targets so far this season in his games. He's top 20 in the NFL wide receivers and targets. So, I think Jerry Jeudy is a decent wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 target right now. And if Amari Cooper gets traded, he could jump up even a little higher. So another spot where I'd be, throwing out some potential buy lows on those guys. And if Amari Cooper does get traded, great. If not, I still think David Njoku and Jerry Jeudy are fantasy viable.
Yeah. And my concern is that Jerry Jeudy might suck and Deshaun Watson definitely sucks, right? So now we have a quarterback who sucks and we have a wide receiver who might suck. It doesn't make me feel great about buying low on Jerry G, but I hear what you're saying. My other thing that I've been thinking about the Browns is this is not working, right? Like this extreme pass heavy spread offense with Deshaun, it's just not working, right? So now they get Nick Chubb back. Maybe eventually they get the tackles back. Maybe they get Wyatt Teller back, and then they go back to some more type of run-based plan. That's what I would do. I mean, I just don't think this is going to work. Or what I would do, actually more accurately, is bench Deshaun Watson and start Jameis Winston and try to have some fun and let the defense try to actually get rewarded by making big plays, splash plays on offense. But I don't think they're going to do that just because of the contract situation with Watson, but we'll certainly see. But yeah, a lot going on with the Browns right now for sure. All right, Daigle, let's go to the top with these running backs. People are freaking out because Bijan Robinson and Breece Hall are losing work to their backups. And I will say they're very talented backups, right? Like Braylon Allen can play, Tyler Algier can play. I don't think it's anything beyond that. It's not Breece sucks. It's not that the Jets hate Breece. It's not that Bijan. It's just Tyler Algier got a hot hand and they stuck with it. And Braylon Allen is a baller, you know? So I don't want to panic on these guys at all. I'm actually interested in buying, specifically on Bijan. I'm interested in buying. I feel like people are really in a panic. He had a shoulder injury coming into last week, wasn't on the injury report. Hamstring injury this week, not on the injury report, but it is a short week. I like the idea of buying on Bijan right now. If people are selling, we still have him 10th overall. Daigle, how are you handling Breece and Bijan?
I don't hate that idea, especially since Breece and Bijan are guys who are never leaving your lineup. Whereas even in a timeshare at times, sporadically, Braylon Allen and Tyler Algier, we still have to question their RB3 flex values. Easier when there are bye weeks like this week, but still tough to squeeze them in when everyone's available. Algier, it's as you mentioned, Bijan opened the second half with a 1-yard carry. Algier came in and his next 2 touches were a 12-yard run and a 13-yard catch. And from that point forward, he out-touched Bijan 8-2 in the second half. They said, we're riding this guy. But it necessarily doesn't happen that way all the time. So while it does make Algier more enticing, Algier, who's a free agent in most leagues, Bijan's still the one, again, who you can't pry from our lineup. So I like that thought process of yours.
I know. It's probably too late, but I would like to change my move to buy Bijan Robinson. I'm sorry. I want to
tell the producers.
I want to change it. Yes, I'm getting the middle finger from producer Ryan right now as we speak. He's actually fired right now as we speak. So yes. Okay. Let's go to this Kenneth Walker thing, man. I mean, right out of the gate, and I talked about it on Team by Team with Silva, the way that Kenneth Walker played was only a little bit surprising me because he's dealt with all these abdominal injuries in the past. But man, he looked so good and played in the pass game. Now, you still saw Zach Charbonnet get 5 targets here. We have a big change, though, in Kenneth Walker's rank. One of the biggest movers of the entire week, up to 31st overall, is Kenneth Walker. And I think that's warranted because, like, I didn't even think that he was a lock to come back this time last week. Not only did he come back, but he dominated and played really well. And it looks like this abdominal thing is nothing related to last year. So again, one of the biggest movers of the entire week. Jack, what do you think about handling Kenneth Walker now? I assume some people might be thinking I should sell him off this huge game that he had on an island. I'm not sure that I would go there given the state of this offense. But yeah, what do you think about Kenneth Walker?
Yeah, I don't think I'd be selling Kenneth Walker. I mean, high-end running backs in fantasy are so hard to come by. So when you stumble upon one, I think you should just hold on. The talk all throughout the preseason was that the Seahawks coaches loved Kenneth Walker. He had a massive role in week 1 before he got hurt. Comes back immediately, out carries Zach Charbonnet 12-2. Looks really good on those 12 carries. And Charbonnet still played more pass downs than Kenneth Walker did on Monday night. But Walker played a non-zero amount in the passing game, whereas last year on third down, long down and distance, or in the 2-minute drill, it was all Charbonnet. That doesn't appear to be the case this year. Walker has a 10% target share, although he's only played 2 games, obviously. And he seems like he has a clear handle on the early down role. He's playing awesome. The Seahawks offense looks really good under Ryan Grubb. So, yeah, I mean, I think you've got a guy who's going to dominate carries on a good offense, and he's more involved in the passing game than he was last year. So I'd just be holding on to Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, and another guy who got a big bump along those lines was Aaron Jones. Sorry, Daigle, go ahead if you have something on Walker.
I just wanted to add that I would also keep on the lookout in 10-team leagues and buy Zach Charbonnet in 12-team leagues. The viability obviously changes while Walker's healthy, but we just saw Charbonnet handle 40 of 43 running back touches with Walker injured. So if this increased workload continues, it's similar to Ty Chandler's outlook, for example, with Aaron Jones' workload increasing. We need to get higher on those backups, assuming that an injury could happen or reoccur.
All right. I let me pitch you guys. You can call me crazy on a sell on Aaron Jones, basically just on the fact that, first of all, he's been incredible this year, right? And like, we don't know if he's gonna be able to maintain this efficiency. He's an older back. Fine, whatever. The bigger thing to me is in this game against the Packers, the usage gap between him and Ty Chandler got so wide. I kind of think that it was because A, revenge game, and B, just a really big game for the Vikings. Like, the bigger the game, the more Aaron Jones is going to play ahead of Ty Chandler in a regular Week 11 game against the Browns, or I don't even know who they play. You know, I think we'll see a more even split there. It's hard for me to give up Aaron Jones given the way he's playing right now, Mark, but I could see people really wanting Aaron Jones. What do you think about him as a sell?
I think it's fair to speculate that he got more touches in week 4 against the Packers in that revenge game in Lambeau. But now we've seen Aaron Jones healthy for 3 games, week 1, week 3, and week 4. And in those 3 games, he's outcarried Ty Chandler 55-18. Also in the last 3 games, he has 6, 5, and 5, or 6, 6, and 5 targets. So, you know, that role is really hard to come by. That's one of the most elite RB roles we've seen. He's second right now among all NFL running backs in Leone's expected fantasy points model. So, you know, in that case, if this usage does hold, I would prefer to hold Aaron Jones or potentially buy high. His value is, I mean, probably as high as it could get though at this point. So, you know, I'm kind of on the fence here. I know that's not the best answer. If I had Aaron Jones, I would probably lean towards holding. But if you have, you know, a healthy stable of running backs around you and need help at another position, it certainly is a good time to sell high on Aaron Jones, because at this point, you know, injuries are a big factor for him. They have been his whole career. But if he does avoid injury, then I think he's pretty much a locked in RB1 the rest of the way.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that we have him at 33 overall, which I think is roughly right. I just think people are going to value him as like a literal top 15 player. And maybe I'm wrong there, but I think that people might actually be doing that in the actual market out there.
Vikings in general are just hard to pinpoint. I moved Ty Chandler up to 5th overall in the one injury away list, by the way, for that Aaron Jones workload. But like right now, even everyone is talking about Sam Darnold, who has played like a potential MVP candidate, probably because of how poor the rest of the league has been too. But also, if Darnold's 10.5% touchdown rate holds, it'd be the highest in the Super Bowl era. It's obviously going to come back to earth as well. And then what does the Vikings offense look like then too? So it's just really hard to pinpoint Minnesota's offense right now.
All right. Let's go to the story of the week. I'm already sick of talking about it, but we'll talk about it one more time. Rashee Rice's situation is unknown right now. We are recording this Wednesday around 2 p.m. Eastern. You know, no word on Rashee Rice. I honestly don't know. For now, we've dropped him down to 111. As Daigle and I discussed yesterday, you can't drop Rashee Rice until you know for sure what's going on with his knee. I'm operating under the baseline because I am a miserable, depressed person that Rashee Rice is indeed done for the year. And therefore, I think there's some interesting moves to make around that. The first one, I mean, we have Travis Kelce up to tight end too. You know, it's going to make me sick, but the guy's going to smash. You know, where Rashee Rice was winning is where Travis Kelce wins, and they need him so badly right now. So obviously, like, if you have Travis Kelce, congrats. I think you played bad and got there. I'm sorry to say it. I think you played bad and you got there. It happens all the time. Listen, it's a story of my life. Play bad and get there. You know what I mean? Like, it's totally fine. It happens sometimes, but you got there. The one that I think is interesting, Daigle, is the Xavier Worthy. I don't think there's a role change for Xavier Worthy. Maybe I'm off. I just don't think he does anything similarly, really, to what Rashee Rice does. So, yeah, maybe he gets a little bit of bump in a target share, but people are probably thinking, there's some people out there who are definitely thinking they have no one else to do anything with. They have to throw the ball to Xavier Worthy 10 times. I don't think that's going to be the case at all. I'm not sure that Xavier Worthy is going to get more than a little bump here, not a big bump. And so if someone in my league was really excited about Xavier Worthy's opportunity now, I might be willing to move on, which sounds crazy considering he just seemed, apparently on the surface at least, got a really big break. So, Daigle, what do you think about Worthy and any Kelsey stuff?
And when you run the fastest 40 in combine history, then of course you can break it for explosive plays like he did in week 1, like he did when Rasheed was injured last week with that 50-yard DPI turned into a touchdown, which was a great 50-yard throw by Patrick Mahomes. But that's kind of what Worthy is dependent on so far, since he's still hovering around a poor 14% target share. And more importantly, doesn't play the slot like Rashee Rice does, just 35% of his routes from there, whereas that's probably going to be Juju Smith-Schuster, who comes in naturally. Looking back to last year, since the Chiefs are pretty much in the same situation they were last year whenever they were treating Rashee Rice as a part-time player through their first 9 games before the bye, think about everyone they use. Justin Watson still around, Kadarius Toney, Richie James, all these guys that were trying to rush to the waiver wire and pick up, just thinking one of them steps in. But all of those guys collectively in those first 9 games around Rice combined for 2 top 36 finishes. They just did absolutely nothing because that wasn't the offense. And more importantly, that's not their skill set. So I don't think Xavier Worthy naturally becomes a top 24 option. Maybe not even top 36, honestly. Now that Rice is gone, I'm more worried just about what the offense becomes without Rice more than anything.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly a huge ceiling on Xavier Worthy, right? If they trust him to start running underneath routes and they make concerted effort to get him the ball more, the upside is huge, and I get that's why people are excited. But yeah, I would at least consider seeing what's out there in the market. All right, Jack, let's go to this tight end stuff. I mean, if you're looking at the top 150 and you sort by tight end, you might think there's a mistake. Where is Mark Andrews in the top 150? You're going to send an email to support. You're going to send me messages on Twitter. You're going to say there's a data error in the entire season top 150 rankings. There's no Mark Andrews and there's no Kyle Pitts. I am here to tell you it is not a data error on purpose. There is no Mark Andrews or Kyle Pitts in the rest of season top 150. We do have Kraft in there in the back. We have Hawkinson in there. And I think Parkinson is one that you could argue over, but we have Parkinson in there as well. The rest of these guys, I mean, all 14 and up that we have, I definitely feel good about having in there over Pitts and Andrews right now. I do have some thoughts on Andrews, but yeah, Jack, I don't know there's much more to say other than these guys are mere streamers at this point. Thoughts on the back of tight end right now?
Yeah, I mean, the Andrews stuff is really bad. The last 2 weeks, he's ran 29% of routes and 24% of routes. He hasn't had a catch since week 2. Jared Goff has more receiving fantasy points in standard leagues than Mark Andrews on the season. It's just been really ugly. The Ravens, the past 2 weeks, of course, have basically just ran the ball the entire game against the Cowboys and Bills. And in that game script, they've just leaned on, they've just depended on Isaiah Likely and then Charlie Kolar to play more snaps, basically, and Andrews just gets phased out. And with the Ravens, expected to be in a lot of positive game scripts, that really just does not bode well for Andrews. Yeah, I mean, I don't even think people are going to be that upset that he's not in the top 150. I think his fantasy owners are pretty much done. He hasn't had a catch in 2 games, 1 target each of the past 2 games. So yeah, I don't really think I'd be fine dropping Andrews at this point. I know it's tough because you invested so much draft capital in him. But I'm not super optimistic. Pitts is at least out there, although his route share did fall a little bit this week and Charlie Werner played a little bit more. But he's just been so ineffective, 12.7% target share on the year. London's target share has really come on over the past 3 games. It just doesn't seem like, it seems like so much of this offense flows through the 3 receivers, Drake London, Mooney, and Ray McLeod. And, going into the year, I didn't really think Ray McLeod would be making Kyle Pitts irrelevant, but that's kind of the way things have gone so far.
And also Kyle Pitts has made Kyle Pitts irrelevant. He can't get open, right? And also they're not doing the things that we talked about last year with Arthur Smith. Get him layup targets, get him on linebacker, get him against guys that he can actually win against, and he can't, right? So he's not winning in line. He's not strong enough. He's not winning outside. He's not quick enough. I'd rather have Mark Andrews than Kyle Pitts right now. At least there's some semblance that in the right game script, Mark Andrews can still play. Mark Andrews can still get open. Mark Andrews can still command targets. Maybe we just we've seen him lead block, the last 3 weeks. That's basically it. It's and the Ravens are out there. Oh, Mark Andrews had a great game. Look at this block and look at I get it, man. Like, I totally get it. You guys are trying to win football games, but like, it's just not it. The only other thing I want to say on tight end, incredible run out for the TJ Hawkinson stashers. Absolutely incredible run out, because you get the entire position failing and everybody, like, you didn't lose any ground while TJ Hawkinson was on IR to any other tight ends. You get TJ Hawkinson back in the middle of the year. Hopefully he can sustain health, and you get Sam Darnold playing at like a borderline MVP level, you know? So, I mean, just absolutely incredible run out for TJ Hawkinson. Practice window is indeed open for him, expecting him back sometime in the next 3 weeks. I'd even consider having him higher in this rest of the season, top 150. Pretty excited about the way it's shaping up for TJ Hawkinson right now. All right. Fallout from the Christian Watson injury, not going on IR doesn't look like is Christian Watson. So, you know, that makes them think that he'll be back. Obviously, we've talked a ton about Dontavian Wicks. I don't think there's really that big a role change for the rest of the guys, because, like, to me, Wicks and Watson were kind of sharing the role, and now it's just going to be all Wicks in that role. I don't know that changes what's going to happen with Jaden Reed and Romeo Doubs, but I'm open to being wrong there. Mark, what do you think about fallout from Christian Watson ankle injury? I mean, he could be out anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks, I'd say, at this point.
I'm really glad we talked about Packers wide receivers as buys last week ahead of their second half outburst against the Vikings. So hopefully people were able to get Jaden Reed last week. I would still lean like buy high or hold on Jaden Reed at this point. He's just every time he touches the ball, good things happen in his rookie season. Now that's translated to his sophomore season. And in this Packers wide receiver core all offseason, you know, we're saying, okay, they have 4 guys that are going to try it out there. If one injury happens, it'll solidify the 3 wide receiver set. And now that's happened. So, you know, if Christian Watson only misses 2 or 3 weeks, I think all of Jaden Reed, Romeo Doubs, and Dontavian Wicks are all fantasy starters in that time frame. Tucker Kraft showed out well this past week as well. We moved him into the top 150 over the likes of Kyle Pitts and Mark Andrews. So if he's out there on waiver wires, I know he was a popular target, but I do like attacking Tucker Kraft here as well, because we just get the targets to condense here a little bit, you know, removing Christian Watson from the target tree. So, yeah. You know, it's, again, you're not going to sneak anything by your other fantasy owners in your league by trading for these guys, but I think they're just great holds or potential buy highs here for all the Packers guys.
Yeah. Okay. Bengals running back Daigle, Moss and Chase Brown. Chase Brown has the big game and really good usage. Now, this was a game where they got a ton of running back touches off and they were leading the game, and it was against the Panthers. I sense some overreaction in the market from people being like, oh my God, see, this is what Chase Brown can do. Well, yeah, when you're winning the entire game against the Panthers and you get 30-something running back touches off, they're both going to look really good. I'm more concerned on Chase Brown and Chase Brown's role when they get 15 running back touches or 18 running back touches, and it's not as smooth sailing as it is against the Panthers. So I love Chase Brown generally as a player. I think he's played really well. I'm still concerned that he's behind Moss where it counts. I do know that Chase Brown got 2 goal line carries and converted both of them on Sunday. But yeah, Daigle, what do you think about a sell on Chase Brown or any other Bengals running back thoughts?
And the 2 goal line carries were definitely out of nowhere and a little bit concerning, but I would just step back, and it wasn't a situation like Rachaad White where he had been playing poorly. So passing it over to Bucky Irving more made sense. Trending in that direction the entire time. This kind of came out of nowhere since Zach Moss has been playing good. He still ran 6 more routes than Chase Brown as well, and looked good in that game, despite Brown scoring the 2 goal line touchdowns. So I'm not worried about it. It may have not been a one-off, I should say. Maybe Chase Brown will be involved more. That's something they hinted at this offseason too. That could be the case. But right now, Moss is still the safer option between the 2. With the bye weeks coming up, it always makes it easier to say this guy's an RB3. You probably have to start Chase Brown or flex him somewhere for injuries as well. But I'm much more comfortable with Moss still at this time. I don't think anything changed that.
Yeah. And you know, if people are willing to give me a lot for Chase Brown, I'd at least explore that right now,
sure,
personally. Last one. 2 more. First is on the Jordan Whittington thing. So I'm actually kind of excited about Jordan Whittington. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know what Cooper Kupp's timeline is. I don't know if Cooper Kupp didn't go on IR because they didn't have any IR spots left because they're so banged up, or they didn't go on IR, or he didn't go on IR because he's going to be back soon. But I do think that Jordan Whittington is like the direct backup to Cooper Kupp. And when they play this 3 wide receiver base, as they did in week 4, Whittington, I think, is the one that I would like to play most. I know that Tutu Atwell had more yards. I know you can make a case for Atwell or Demarcus Robinson also. I think Whittington is the one that I like most. Jack, any thoughts on Rams wide receiver here?
Yeah, I think Whittington's going to be valuable in the short term. I think Tutu Atwell is too. Demarcus Robinson has been on the field a ton and just hasn't really done much. Whittington went from splitting wide receiver 3 reps with Tyler Johnson in week 3 to all of a sudden leading Rams wide receivers in snaps at 94% and getting a 28% target share. I think that week 4, especially given that Whittington played well, is probably more indicative of what we're going to see until Kupp and Puka come back. So that's pretty much just the big question. When those guys are going to be back, it's really hard to see Whittington having a legitimate role just because those guys both are 25 to 30% target share guys. But in the short term, I definitely think Whittington is likely to be the highest volume Rams receiver, with Atwell also viable in some leagues because he gets down the field more. That's kind of how I'm approaching Rams wide receivers until those guys are back.
All right. Last one here before we move on, Mark, is the Titans stuff. So Titans aren't a bye this week. They looked very good, or at least ran the ball very well against the Dolphins on Monday night. My thought on the Titans stuff is if they go to Mason Rudolph, I can't believe I'm saying this. If they go to Mason Rudolph, I think it's a good thing. And I hate Mason Rudolph. He stinks also. But I actually think that it's better for all parties involved than the Will Levis experiment. And like, I don't know that I believe Brian Callahan that they're going to stick with Will Levis. So it's an interesting time to try to buy on these guys, especially because I think DeAndre Hopkins could get moved. So I did consider Calvin Ridley as my move to make for this week based on 2 factors. First, you hopefully get Mason Rudolph. Second, DeAndre Hopkins could be traded. Not that that really matters too much. Generally, it's not like he's commanding a ton of targets anyways. They do have a bye this week, which complicates things. But then they come out home against the Colts, at Bills, at Lions, versus Patriots. They do still have games late in the season against the Commanders and Colts. But the most important thing to me is the Titans playoff schedule, fantasy playoffs. Week 15 at Colts, one of the best matchups. Week 16 at Jaguars, one of the best matchups. I messed that up. Oh my God. Okay. Week 15, home against Jaguars. Home against Bengals.
Yeah.
Home against Bengals. Week 16
Just reading
at Colts. Week 17 at Jaguars. I mean, you're not going to find, I know I messed that up. There's a ton more easy games in there too, but you're not going to find a better fantasy playoff schedule than you will with the Titans. So it's a real uncomfortable buying on these guys. I know Tony Pollard's probably been the one people feel best about, but I did consider buy Calvin Ridley for my move to make this week. Mark, what do you think about that one and any other Titans stuff?
I don't have a whole lot to say here or a whole lot of confidence in buying the Titans guys. Sure, the schedule is great, but I don't necessarily think that Mason Rudolph is going to, ascend this offense into like a top half of the league type of deal where we need these players come fantasy playoff time. Sure, they had this island game against the Dolphins where the Dolphins offense was just so inept that they kept giving the ball back to the Titans and the play volume got a little bit elevated for them to look good. So at this point, I'm not actively going out to try and buy Titans. It's, again, I don't think they're necessarily needle movers. So, if you have someone that's selling them low for whatever reason, they're concerned about Mason Rudolph and Will Levis and just the ineptitude of the offense, then, maybe you could buy low, but for my sake, it's mostly just kind of a wait and see and not too many moves to be made here.
Yeah. Okay.
Go
ahead.
I'm not going to make producer Ryan change the graphic at the end, but I'll buy DeAndre Hopkins. I think I'm a little bit more excited than the rest of the company about him because we have seen his routes increase the last couple games as he's still coming off that knee sprain he suffered in August. And in that time, he's boxed out Calvin Ridley, a 21.3% target share to Ridley's 12.7%. This was an argument we had during the preseason too in our Slack was, can Hopkins just outright outproduce Ridley? And I still think it's very live, especially because I'm probably fading trades compared to everyone else, it's nothing fun like that ever happens at the deadline. And we're always upset at the deadline when it doesn't happen. So, yeah, I like Hopkins in this Titans offense the rest of the way.
Let's get to some of your questions. Appreciate everyone who submitted questions. We do ask for questions if you are interested in submitting yours usually on Tuesdays from the Establish the Run Twitter. Cody Ash 8 says, sell low on Breece Hall. Bad time to sell, but holding might tank his value further. This is exactly what I was talking about earlier when we talked about Bijan and Breece. I mean, people are in full-blown panic. I don't know, Jack. Should we be in full-blown panic on Breece Hall? I don't think I am, but it seems like a lot of people are.
I'm not full-blown panicking. I am more worried than I was last week because Braylon Allen got a couple of goal line snaps, including one that didn't actually happen because the Jets got a false start before they could go for it. But they had a 4th and goal from the 1 yard line, and Braylon Allen was in instead of Hall. I thought that was fairly concerning. But Hall still has such a massive receiving role. He's still the 1A of the rushing committee. I don't think Braylon Allen all of a sudden is like the goal line back. I just think that they're more willing to split that up than maybe they were a few weeks ago. So I wouldn't be panicking. I also wouldn't be just doing nothing. And if you get a really good offer for Hall, I'd be at least open to it.
Like this trade I have up on the screen right now, for anyone watching on YouTube, like let's say you wanted to sell Breece Hall, you got Drake London and Joe Mixon. We have that as relatively fair. I still think personally, I'd probably rather have the Breece Hall side there than Drake London and Joe Mixon, but maybe I'm being stubborn on the Breece Hall stuff. I just think that he's no longer getting 95 or 90% of the running back touches like he was last year, but almost no running backs in the league are. So like we have to compare him to other guys that he's up against, and Breece is still, I mean, he went nuts last year with freaking Zach Wilson at quarterback. It's like, I don't think it's just a volume thing on Breece is my point. If he loses 6, 7, 9 touches a game to Braylon Allen, I still think Breece Hall can smash. So yeah.
If you look at the opportunities, obviously he was ineffective in week 4, but looking at his rushing attempts plus targets this season, week 1, he had 22, week 2, 22 again, week 3, 21, this past week, 15. I mean, that's still RB1 volume right there. And I'm confident enough in Breece Hall's ability to produce on that. So I agree, would not be panicking.
All right, let's go to this question from BNL Bright 31. Says, I have a 4-0 team. Shout out to you. He says, how aggressively would you go after Tyreek Hill? Seems like his trade value is the lowest it will be. And if Tua is back to the fantasy playoffs, he's right back as a top 3 wide receiver. I mean, we've talked about this a couple times. And the signs on Tua are good if you want Tua to return and play football again. Tua has been traveling with the team. Tua was at the game on Monday night, did his normal pregame routine before the game. If he's back in week 8 at this point, would not surprise me at all. I mean, absolutely would not surprise me at all if Tua is back in week 8. Knowing that, Mark, if you have a 4, and by the way, whoever has Tyreek is probably like last, right? I mean, they're just dying right now. They're probably 1-3 or 0-4. You could get Tyreek Hill relatively cheaply, I think. Mark, what do you think about making a buy on him right now?
For sure. I think if you're 4-0, I think Tyreek is the perfect player to target. It does seem like all indications are that Tua Tagovailoa is going to return in week 8 when he's first eligible to from the concussion. So obviously, concussions could happen again to Tua this season, and that would make Tyreek, pretty much a moot fantasy player again. I will say too, looking at their playoff schedule, they are at the Texans, home versus the 49ers, at Cleveland in the fantasy playoffs. So kind of when you look at it that way too, that's not the dream matchups we'd hope for Tyreek Hill, but I'm in a firm belief that Tyreek Hill is a wide receiver 1 when Tua returns. So certainly at 4-0, I think that's a good gamble to take. And I agree with the question here that, Tyreek Hill's value is pretty much as low as it can possibly get at this point.
Yeah. I mean, who would you rather have, Aaron Jones or Tyreek Hill? If I'm 4-0, I'd rather have Tyreek Hill. I get that. And like we have that favored by 20%, in our trade calculator for those guys watching on YouTube. I don't think the market views it that way. If I had Tyreek Hill and I was 1-3 and somebody offered me Aaron Jones, I'd probably take it. I can't face this anymore with Tyreek and get to 1-4 or 1-5. So, that's why when you're using the calculator, just try to be aware of what the other team is going through. We don't need to have every trade look completely fair in the calculator. Team needs and situations are going to be factors as well. Oh, on those same lines, Minnesota Milkman 84 said, what's the viability on Achane rest of season? I still think Achane can be fine with the right backup quarterback, and maybe Huntley with another week of practice can actually like figure it out. I can't believe how bad he played the other day, though. I'm still optimistic on Achane even when Huntley's in there. So I really still love Achane when Tua gets back also.
That's QB 20, Tyler Huntley. Be careful what you say about him.
He was so bad. The other thing that I'd say is that the Mostert thing does complicate it a little bit when Mostert gets back. If Mostert gets back from whatever he has, chest or something like that, he's going to play. You know, I mean, he's going to be out there and get reps as well. But yeah, definitely still like Achane. All right. Let's see. Waiver wire scientist says, Daigle, at what point do we abandon hope on Chicago wide receivers and realize it's just a worse version of Seattle last year? I actually wrote a note to myself for next draft season. I have sticky notes, and I'm going to put the names of the offensive coordinators that I hate on the top of my monitor up here. So every time that I'm drafting, I can say, oh, he has Shane Fraudrin as his coordinator. I'm going to take a pass there. Oh, he has Nathaniel Hackett as his coordinator. I'm going to pass there. And honestly, I would have passed on the Cliff stuff also. So that would have been a loss. Well, it looks like it'll be a loss so far. But yeah, anyways, Daigle, Chicago wide receivers, are we abandoning hope?
I love how most people wake up to positive affirmations on their mirror to start the day. And you have F. Luke Getsy just staring right back at you. No, we're not abandoning hope just yet. It was a Rams defense. This week, it's another great matchup for Chicago, a poor Panthers defense. And because of their injuries in the front seven, the Panthers also losing Shaq Thompson, Josie Jewell for this upcoming matchup. Maybe it is another game where DeAndre Swift just dominates on the ground, both in touches and in efficiency. But I don't expect the Bears to be a downhill offense like they were in that matchup against Los Angeles all year long. Maybe just by necessity. Even in that one, 20 or 30 running back touches, 23 carries to Caleb Williams' 23 pass attempts. It was just odd to keep everything closer to the line of scrimmage and not allow Caleb Williams to really go downfield at all. So not buying that's how they're going to play the rest of the year. And it's the lowest point, like for everyone. Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, who I know is still dropped by some people and on waiver wires at places. I had to answer those questions in the Discord. So it's just a situation where I still think getting all of them is perfectly acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, our trade calculator has this fair Rome Odunze for Evan Ingram and Geno Smith. You know, I think Geno Smith is awesome in a one quarterback league. He's just not that. He's just not that valuable, right? You can string, and I love Geno, and yeah, I think he's a massive hit in best ball. It's just he's not like a huge asset in one quarterback league. So that's why the trade calculator, I think, is right here. Rome Odunze for Evan Ingram and Geno Smith is a fairish one. We do have the Rome Odunze side favored there. All right. Alex says, wide receiver strong team in PPR. Should I trade Brian Thomas for a high upside RB2 like Bucky Irving? So I think, Jack, a lot of people probably have spots like this where they have strong wide receiver teams, but they need running back help. I hate to sell Brian Thomas for something like Bucky Irving right now. We have that 39% favored on the Brian Thomas side. I would hope you can get more for Brian Thomas, but yeah, Jack, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I feel similarly to you. If I'm selling Brian Thomas, I would generally want more, even if it makes sense for team needs. I mean, if you're in like a really unique situation where Thomas is like your wide receiver 6 and your RB1 is like Rico Dowdle or something, maybe you make that trade. But I think for the vast majority of teams, I don't have a problem with selling Thomas if he's just not playing for you and there's not a path to him playing for you. For him, I don't know. But I would prefer someone better than Bucky Irving.
I mean, to me, Bucky Irving is not going to suddenly get 20 touches a game. Like Rachaad White might. I think Rachaad White will recede some, but that doesn't mean Bucky Irving is going to go full workhorse, right? So this trade that I have up here now, Brian Thomas for Bucky Irving and Dontavian Wicks, that to me, that's the kind of return that I think you should be trying to get for Brian Thomas, if not more, for him right now. Brian J. Meyer says, I have a 3-1 team. Shout out to you. I lost both Rice and Pacheco. Oh no. He says, I've been offered Jacobs and AJ Brown for Saquon and Wandale. So I'll put this in the calculator here Mark, I do think AJ Brown is a really interesting buy right now as the Eagles go into their buy. If someone's struggling and they have AJ Brown and he is going to his buy, they might be worried. But give me that trade one more time, Mark.
One side, it's Josh Jacobs and AJ Brown. The other side is Saquon Barkley and Wan'Dale Robinson.
Yeah.
So yeah, on this one, we moved Saquon to the number 1 overall player in our rest of season rankings. I think that's fair, just given his workload at this point in time and what we've seen from him production wise. There's just not many running backs in the NFL at this point in time. We docked Bijan and Breece Hall because their RB2s are stealing some work, and that doesn't seem to be the case at all for Saquon Barkley. Pretty much the RB2 that we're worried about there is Jalen Hurts stealing goal line carries. So you are giving up the best player in fantasy at this point with Saquon Barkley. But yeah, I think getting AJ Brown and Josh Jacobs in return is pretty strong. Obviously, Wan'Dale Robinson has posted strong target and reception games early on in the season, but his upside is still extremely limited. And as the season goes along, teams are going to catch up to this Giants kind of PPR scam mentality and force Daniel Jones to push the ball downfield, which he has been horrible in doing so already. So I would lean the AJ Brown and Josh Jacobs side. That's what our trade calculator says as well. I'm pretty much in agreement there. Josh Jacobs may be more of a high-end RB2 than an RB1 at this point with Emmanuel Wilson coming on, but still the Packers offense is great, and I still want pieces of it. So I would lean the AJ Brown and Josh Jacobs side, although I know it's really difficult to get rid of Saquon.
Yeah, I would too. And I'm not excited about it. I know Wan'Dale is like a PPR scam and people love making jokes about it. It's just not the kind of player that I'm excited about having on my roster, whereas AJ Brown and Josh Jacobs, I mean, with Jordan Love back, and I get that Emmanuel Wilson's been playing a ton. I like Emmanuel Wilson. Josh Jacobs still has, really good upside. And then obviously love AJ Brown. Architect of APA says, I have a 2-2 team, single quarterback with Anthony Richardson, Jordan Love, and Jaden Daniels. Which one should I trade to improve other positions? Deb, so basically, Daigle, he's saying, which one out of these three do you like the least? A-Rich, Love, and Jaden. But we do need to take into account that nobody might want to trade for Anthony Richardson right now. So anyways, which quarterback would you want to trade out of these three?
I'm weighing all the offers. Obviously, it would be Anthony Richardson among these two. But if I need to trade Jordan Love, that's fine as well. Jaden Daniels, like maybe the luck runs out. Maybe he does get injured since he's still taking some big hits. But right now, the QB1 in fantasy for all the right reasons. Even opening up the playbook the past 2 weeks. Maybe that's because they have Noah Brown, someone else who can stretch the field outside of Luke McCaffrey, allowing the Commanders offense to do so. But I mean, Jaden Daniels, man, like you just, in my opinion, you just can't get off of him right now.
Yeah, like, we have it relatively fair between Jaden Daniels and T. Higgins. Again, in single quarterback leagues, these quarterbacks are not worth that much, but the way Jaden Daniels is playing is obviously worth a ton right now. He does have pretty difficult matchups coming up.
How do you feel, Mark? Because I know we had this discussion on the rest of season call after week 1. Do you still feel the same way? Is that like maybe this type of offense, even though again it has opened up a little bit more since then, is not sustainable?
Well, yeah, thanks, Daigle. I did have Jaden Daniels as a sell after week 1, which has easily been my worst take.
I wrote it up. Yeah. No, it's a tag team, buddy. You're not taking the blame.
No, so I feel very wrong at Jaden Daniels at this point. My opinion is that I'm not necessarily in the camp that he's like the QB1 the rest of the way. I do think things will toughen up for him, and his value is sky high at this point, just based on what he's been able to produce. Still when I look at this offense and see behind Terry McLaurin, they have Noah Brown and Olamide Zaccheaus and Zach Ertz at tight end. Like I just think the magic is going to run out a little bit as we get more film on Jaden Daniels in this Washington offense. So, I still lean sell high on Jaden Daniels, but again, I've kind of been in that camp the whole time. So I don't know if I'm just defending my stance there or being foolish. But I do think it's, given his perceived value, everyone I hear is dubbing him the QB1 in fantasy. Yeah. And I would still take Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts over him. I think it's, more of a conversation with Lamar, but I would still take Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts over him.
Yeah, I would personally have Allen and Lamar over him for sure. I'm not sure on Jalen Hurts, but yeah, I would for sure take Allen and Lamar over him. And, he's played the Giants, Bengals, and Cardinals the last 3 weeks. I don't want to take anything away from him and Cliff. I'm ready to take my L on Cliff. People, oh my God, they're all over me. They just want me to capitulate on Cliff Kingsbury. I didn't know Cliff Kingsbury had so many fans out there. But anyways, Next two games, versus Browns at Ravens, going to be a bit tougher here for Jaden Daniels in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked to hear you say you would take him over Jalen Hurts. I mean, Jalen Hurts is throwing to AJ Brown, Devontae Smith,
I know.
Dallas Goedert has the same rushing role.
I know, but you guys are missing it. You guys are missing it. It's a generational Saquon season, and there's nothing we can do about it. He's not going to get hurt. He's going to average 8 yards a carry. He's going to score every touchdown from 10 yards out. It's it's just, I'm sorry. And believe me, I don't want to be here to report that news. That's the news that I'm here to report.
All right.
And Hurts's rushing role is similar outside of generational Saquon. I've heard rumors about.
Yeah. Okay. J-Man 1700. Last question we're going to do here. Today, Jack says, I've been offered Puka and London for Marvin Harrison Jr. and Chuba. So Puka and London, for those audio listeners, I am going into the trade calculator right now. For what was the other side of that? Oh, Chuba and Marvin Harrison.
Chuba and MHJ.
Yeah. So on Chuba Hubbard is really, we have that pretty even in the trade calculator. I think the question to ask yourself is what happens when Jonathan Brooks gets back? Now, me and Silva talked yesterday about Chuba Hubbard thing seems weird. He blew out his knee in November. It's been 11 months. They're still not opening the practice window for Jonathan Brooks, suggesting they don't think he'll be ready in the next 3 weeks. Or maybe they just think he's a rookie. We suck. We want him here for the long term. We're not going to rush it at all. That was always my take on Jonathan Brooks. They're just going to coddle him and coddle him and coddle him and maybe keep Chuba Hubbard as the 1A. Now, I'm in the minority there. Everyone else thinks that Jonathan Brooks is going to come back and just start wrecking and getting 20 touches a game. I just don't think that makes any sense for the Panthers, but it's an interesting trade here. Jack, what do you think about London and Puka? And by the way, the latest news on Puka is like week 8 or week 9 in a best case scenario, I think. So yeah, not ideal. But yeah, what do you think about this trade, Jack? London and Puka for Marvin and Chuba.
Yeah, this is another one where it kind of depends on your record. If you're 4-0 and you can afford to sit on Puka Nacua, I think that maybe it makes sense. But for me, it's really hard to trade Marvin Harrison Jr. Ever since that really bad week 1. I mean, he's just been a rocket ship. And on Chuba, it's a really interesting case because he has back-to-back 100-yard games. Week 4 was by far the widest gap between Chuba and Miles Sanders. He's playing really well, and like you said, they're not opening Jonathan Brooks' window. So I think that he's going to be viable in the short term, and I think that there's some chance, like you said, that Jonathan Brooks doesn't come back and immediately seize that role, and Chuba has a role throughout the season. I think in a vacuum, I honestly lean toward the Harrison and Hubbard side, but if you're 4-0 and you're optimizing for the playoffs already, you have a chance at 2 wide receiver ones here in London and Puka.
Yeah.
I like you when pinpointing the Titans playoff schedule. Like, I don't care what happens with Brooks between now and then. It's a matter of trying to get the Panthers running back right from week 14 on, because the playoff schedule is the Bucks, Eagles, Cowboys, Cardinals, and Bucks again. Week 13 on, actually. It's the softest 5-game stretch possible. We need to have that running back. And long-term, Chuba's just not someone who has held up efficiency-wise. So I know it's looked a lot better from Andy Dalton, but I still want to bet on Jonathan Brooks at his lowest point. And I'm not someone who thinks he gets every touch when he comes back. I think it's going to be the slowest, most agonizing burn possible, but I'm just trying to be ahead of week 14. That's it.
Yeah, no, I get that for sure. I think Chuba's probably better than he gets credit for. I mean, Chuba's underlying stuff, he's always graded out well. But yeah, we'll see. All right. We said it all. Actually, we've said too much. Let's get to our one move to make here as I tech lord back to the other page. I will start with Mark, your one move to make ahead of week 5.
I'm going to go with a bit of a tandem one here, and it's by Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. I lean a little bit towards the Deebo Samuel side here, but I ultimately think both are good buys in this 49ers offense that looks like it could be without Christian McCaffrey until November. According to Kevin Cole's adjusted QB efficiency metrics, Brock Purdy is second in the NFL in total EPA, behind only Jaden Daniels, who we've talked about is just playing at an otherworldly level at this point. And so far, most of the passing game production has gone to Juwan Jennings, and I think it's going to tilt back towards Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuel at this point. So I think both are great buy lows. The 49ers upcoming schedule is amazing. They get the Cardinals at home this week. They play at the Seahawks, which have been an absolute, fantasy fest so far early in the season. The Seahawks have a super high pass rate and are flooding those games with points. They face the Chiefs, which is tough, but potential shootout. And then the Cowboys, also a weak defense. Their fantasy playoffs for the 49ers as well. They get the Rams at home, Dolphins on the road, and the Lions at home. Talk about an amazing fantasy playoff schedule. So I think now is the time to buy Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. I know we had buy Brandon Ayuk as a move to make last week. I still think it holds true, and both are great buys at this point with Christian McCaffrey's target share, pulled out of this 49ers offense for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, love that one. I had buy Brandon Ayuk last week. Still feel pretty decent about that. The Juwan Jennings stuff is just too much for my stomach to take. I don't think that's going to sustain. Anyways, Daigle, one move to make ahead of week 5.
There are quite a few, but I've whittled mine down to selling Dallas Goedert over the bye week, because in the first 2 games with either or both of A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith, Goddard was 12th among all tight ends in target share as the tight end 13 in points per game. Fast forward to his next 2 games with both Smith and A.J. Brown injured, he of course skyrockets to a position high 29% target share as the tight end 1 all of a sudden. So it's not just that you're selling him at his highest point. Also, think about what the rest of your league is doing, because they're being too introspective. They are saying my tight end sucks. They're not stepping back and saying every tight end sucks. So go to the panicking owners, realizing that tight end does not matter in 2024, and say I have a good tight end and get back at the biggest haul possible.
I like it. People hate trading for guys going into the bye, but I hear you. Maybe you can pull that one off. All right, Jack, your move to make this week.
Yeah, building off that, I'm going to say buy Jalen Hurts. Like you said, people hate trading for guys going into their bye. I mean, there's been no bye weeks yet. Like, everyone still has their bye. So it's not like you're losing a week by acquiring Jalen Hurts. And people probably would be more open to selling him before a week where he's not going to play. Hurts has not been what you paid for him in fantasy draft so far. He has 1 game with more than 18.4 fantasy points. I think at this point, Jalen Hurts is a good quarterback, but I think it's fair to say that the talent around him elevates his production a lot. He has not had that talent in recent weeks with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith out. In week 6, we expect to have them back. They're still doing the tush-push, just they haven't had the opportunity as frequently this year. I might have to run this one back in a couple weeks, because out of the bye, they get the Browns and the Giants. But after that, they get Bengals, Jags, Cowboys, Commanders, Rams. That's a pretty dream schedule. I think people probably paid a 3rd or 4th round pick for Jalen Hurts. They're probably not happy with his production. He's going into a bye, so I think now is a pretty good time to sell him, or to buy him.
To buy Jalen Hurts. Yeah, definitely some panic out there in the streets on Jalen Hurts. I bet our rank is like, we have him 26 overall. I bet that's way above market, or at least market perception on Jalen Hurts. All right. My move to make was going to be buy high on Jaden Reed, but I don't want to be a pathetic loser who says to buy the guy who just came off 140 yards and a touchdown, okay? So producer Ryan graciously, in order to save his job, has allowed me to change mine to buy Bijan Robinson. I didn't realize how much panic was out there, honestly. But there's a ton of panic out there. Adam, what are we going to do? Should I trade Bijan Robinson? Tyler Algier is better. I don't think this is an Arthur Smith situation. I do not see this new Falcons regime any way similar to the way that Arthur Smith saw this spot. I get that Tyler Algier can play. I get that he's going to get carries. This game that he had last week, I think is going to be more of the outlier than the norm. And so immediately you get good matchups for Bijan. Bucks, Panthers, Seahawks, Bucks, Cowboys coming up next. And then if you go to the fantasy playoffs, Raiders, Giants, Commanders. I mean, Raiders, Giants, Commanders, and you want to trade away Bijan Robinson? Give me Bijan. And also 40-something yard or 30-something yard pass reception touchdown for Bijan last game, called back by another weak penalty. Another week penalty. The Amari Cooper one was bad. The Bijan one was bad too. Conversation around Bijan right now would be way different if that play had stood. So I didn't think this was an option coming into the show, but now that I see all this Bijan panic, buy Bijan Robinson. All right. We've gone over an hour here on season-long trades. You're welcome. For Mark, for Jack, for Daigle, producer Ryan, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.